The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. That word sorrow is the same Hebrew word as toil used in Genesis. Now listen, this is Apostle Paul. But those who desire to be rich, who chase after riches, fall into temptation and a snare. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith and greediness, and have pierced themselves through with many, what does that say? Sorrows. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, has no sorrow with it. You chasing it yourself gives you sorrows. It takes a lot of work to amass wealth for whatever your purpose is. So either you're going to do it or the blessing's going to do it. The blessing has to be the one to do it. I believe that God created us to be fruitful and productive. I know he did, because when he blessed us in the garden, he said, be fruitful. Those were the two words he used to bless us. And that's what blessing is. It is an empowerment to prosper, to be fruitful. And so believers, we should be the most productive. When you look at the parables of Jesus, they were all about productivity. Jesus solved the issue that we struggle with in the world today of how do we maximize productivity and get results and make profit, but not kill ourselves doing it. Jesus came and restored the original garden order of how to do it, of how to have that fruitfulness without toil. Because, well, I'm going to hop into the lesson here. So what I'm going to share with you today is one of my 1-hour trainings, and I'm going to take one piece of it and try to get it done in about 10 minutes. So pray for me that actually happens. But if I go too long, just wave at me and say that's enough, because this could go on forever. As a believer, you're supposed to be a far greater producer than anyone else in the world. I believe that. The world will work twice as hard to produce a tenth of what God can do in a moment. And accessing that, how do you access that? You can only access that in a position of rest. You can only access that through the blessing. So yeah, let's just get into it, because I'm going to otherwise hop around and end up in 20 different lessons. This comes from the first chapter of my book, and that chapter is called The Source of Everything. And so I'm just taking a small portion of that, because it will take me an hour to get through it. And I'm doing a tale of two systems. And those two systems, I'm going to just give it away just in case I don't have time to finish, are the blessing and the curse. When God created mankind, he created him with a purpose and a system in which to fulfill that purpose. That system is called the blessing system. The blessing system is the system of rest. That is the system of rest, the blessing. So Genesis 1:28, then God blessed them. He made mankind, he blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. So in blessing them, in those words, when God speaks, well, when we speak, words are containers for great power, to bless or to curse. And so it said God blessed them, and then it's actually defining how he blessed them. Be fruitful. With those words came the power to do it. With that blessing is the power to be fruitful, to be productive, to prosper. Fill the earth and subdue it. And I talked about anybody wins some warfare. You know, it's interesting. We think of the garden as just perfect, calm, nothing going on. But he gave them power to subdue. That meant that he expected, and they should have expected a challenge. He should have expected warfare. And that challenge came just about immediately in the form of the serpent. But they were given the power to subdue. The problem that Adam and Eve ran into, that mankind ran into, and that we have today is when we abandon the power of rest, the power of the blessing, and we choose toil instead. I'm going to explain to you why we do that. The blessing is empowerment to produce, prosper, or be fruitful. So the blessing put on man was literally fruitfulness, to be productive. And there are certain attributes that are built into the blessing that you can recognize when you're operating in it versus if you're operating in toil. In the blessing system, there is purpose. You have a purpose. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, and I might have been the one I was just on. I'm going to hop around a little bit here. But he gave him a purpose, which is be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish, the sea, fowls of the air, all of that. So he gave them a purpose, he gave them a design. So you know you're operating in the blessing one way is if you know what the purpose is that God has given you. Not your own, but he's given you a purpose. And then he's going to give you provision. What was interesting is that he gave Genesis 1:20, let's go back and look at that. He gave them the assignment. And then immediately after that, he gave them the provision. He said, now behold, I've given you all these herb-bearing trees for food, and it'll be food for the animals. So he gave them the assignment, said, this is what you're going to have to do. I'm giving you the ability to do it. And then now, before you even have to think about it, here's all provision to do it. You don't got to worry about taking care of yourself. In the blessing system, God takes care of you. You don't take care of yourself. He said, I'm going to take care of you, and I'll make sure there's enough for all of your, let's call it your property, your staff, all the animals and everything. It's all taken care of. Everything is taken care of. God's given you a multi-million-dollar vision, and it's like, all right, it's time to step out. And the first thing we think about is, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to go? Well, I'm going to get a loan, or I'm going to do this and that. And whatever God leads you to, you do that. But in a recent Overcome the Pressure meeting, I was telling the man, I said, when you've listened and God's spoken to you, the next thing you do is keep listening. Because sometimes we hear the first command and we just run out. And we try to do it in our strength based on the will of ideas and skills that we have. Instead of continuing to listen, how do you want me to take that first step into the promised land? How do you want me to go? Because provision is going to be there all the way. So provision comes immediately with the purpose. You just may not always see it yet. But I will say this, it always comes in the form of a seed. He gave them herb-bearing trees. So he gave them a perpetual system that will continue to generate seed time and harvest. And that will never pass away until heaven and earth passes away. All right. So, power. And again, he gave them the power to be fruitful, have dominion. So he gave them an authority and the ability to do it. And the power was not the ability of the work of their hands, which is what the toil system is. It is the words of your mouth, what you speak, what you say. God is the speaking spirit, and he created man in his image to also speak. He put us in flesh bodies, but we weren't supposed to live outside in, we're supposed to live inside out. And God would think through us and we would speak. The Spirit of God was one. Okay. I got to decide which rabbit trail I'm going to go down. All right, bring it back. All right. We speak to create because we're made in the image of God. Otherwise, he could have just used the angels that he had, them as princes and rulers. He could have used the animals, but we are speaking spirits, something different about us when we operate in the blessing. But a tragedy, the greatest tragedy in human history, took place not long after. I know where I'm going. I'm trying to decide what I need to skip for the sake of time. All right, let's do this. In the garden, there was a fruit. We're aware of this. Some say it was an apple. Some say it might have been a pomegranate. The scripture doesn't actually explicitly state. But there was a fruit. And I don't have a whole lot of time to dig into the significance of that fruit and how it connects to the tithe. But it was a vow that man had that this is how I demonstrate that I know, God, you're greater than me. Because you made me in your image. I can walk in the cool of the day with you. I can speak like you. You gave me dominion and authority over all the work of your hands. But you are still greater than me. And the way that I demonstrate that is this fruit right here. Because you've given me all things. I'm giving one thing back to you, this one tree, the knowledge of good and evil. And that is how I'm going to demonstrate with this vow, this tithe, that you are greater than me. And I remember who the source of my authority and my power is. It does not come from myself. But when you violate that vow, when you violate that tithe, that is how you get into the system of toil. And so the curse system, the second system, the one we were never designed to live under, was created the moment mankind ate that fruit. Because he decided, it was a treasonous act, but this is what happens when we decide to get into toil today. Because we basically do the same thing, repeat that same action of eating that fruit. We decide that I can do this by myself. I don't need God to succeed. I can make my own provision, and I can generate my own power, and I can determine my own purpose. So we take those three things, and we come up with our own purpose. We decide we're going to create our provision with the work of our hands, and then we're going to do it with the power of our flesh. And in doing so, we literally burn out in the midst of doing that. And so that's why you can have millionaires who are unhappy. You know, the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. I'm jumping ahead. Let me just wait till I get there because I really want to break that down. It's something that a lot of us have missed. But let's just talk about the curse system and how vastly different it is. We have be fruitful, multiply, replenish, subdue. Behold, I've given you everything for provision. Now this is the curse. Cursed is the ground for your sake, and toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. Out of it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you shall return. So much, it's the exact opposite. First, it was freely, there was a mist that came up from the ground. They didn't even need rain. Like, it was freely giving its fruits to mankind. Because his focus, his assignment was not just to till the ground. His assignment was something far greater. The garden was step one in God's expansion plan for the universe. And they abandoned it. And so now, in their curse, instead of God taking care of everything and you can just focus on the assignment, now you got to take care of yourself. And you cannot take care of yourself and fulfill God's assignment. It's impossible. That's the reason pastors die early, sickness in their body, or you become overcome with the pressure that you fall into sin, addictions, infidelity, things like that. There's a reason these things happen. It's not just coincidental, not because the person who started it, oh, they were always a fraud, always a crook. No, 90% of people who fall, I believe they were 100% in it. They were doing the will of God the best they knew how. But they never got off of this system. Getting born again doesn't just automatically get you off this system. That's the step one to getting off this system. But to get off the toil system, it takes a mind renewal. And it takes, when the Lord began to challenge me on this and teach me this to me over the course of 10 years, it was, rest may be the hardest thing you ever do. You may have to work harder to be in rest than you've ever had to, but it'll save your life. It'll extend your life. Wisdom says that she has riches in her right hand and long life in her left hand, or maybe it's reversed, but both come with wisdom. You're going to have to sweat your face. You're going to have to eat bread till you return to the ground. Interesting. First, let us make man our image after our likeness, just like God. Now it's, now you're dust. Dust you shall return. What happened? There's a revelation there when you realize that the serpent eats the dust of the ground. You realize actual snakes don't really eat dirt. They eat creatures that are smaller than them, sometimes bigger than them. So when he said serpent, eat the dust of the ground, there's something way more going on there than him just talking about a snake getting on his belly. Something else is being talked about there. Until you are broken down the dust, the devil can't get to you. But now, through toil, you can be broken down the dust and the devil can devour you. That's how he can get to you now. In the curse system, Jesus talked about the God of this world, the prince of the power of the air. He's coming for me, but he finds nothing in me. He can't get to me because Jesus was on the blessing system. But he's the God of this system, the devil is. That system that he rules over. As long as you're on that system, he can pull the rug out from under you at any time. Corporations that have been on S&P 500 for decades just suddenly overnight go belly up. Someone bigger, stronger comes and takes them out. And then it's a mess. This system is inflationary. It's overtaxed. It's toil. It's impoverished. There's a big wealth gap. All this stuff that we try to vote for politicians to fix, they can't fix it because they're in the system too. Only the blessing works. There's no economic system that works except the blessing system. That's the only one. And you can use this in America, the land of the free, the best country on the planet, I believe, or you can use it somewhere in a third world country and the blessing will work for you no matter where you are. It's not an American message. This is a message that will work for anyone who will call on the name of the Lord. I'm running out of time here. The curse system, opposite. Pressure, poverty, pain. Pressure to provide for your own livelihood is now on you. People burn out, they get anxiety, depression, drug addictions. You're operating on the wrong system. A four-cylinder car is going to struggle going up a mountain. It's not designed for that. You are not designed to meet your own needs. That's why it kills you. Poverty. It isn't just being homeless and not having a meal. Poverty is having a vision and not being able to fulfill it. If you've got a vision and you can't fulfill it, that's poverty because you don't have what you need to get it done. And it makes the heart sick. I believe it's in Proverbs. It makes the heart sick when you have a hope deferred, a dream deferred. It makes the heart sick. It's killing you because you have something that God put in you and you can't get it done. That's poverty. It's not good enough. God's the God of abundance. Then pain. It said, in the sweat of your brow, let's go back real quick. I want to talk about pain real quick. And sweat of your face. Oh, and first, this line here, and toil you shall eat of it. That word toil pops up in all throughout the Old Testament and New Testament. But in the Old Testament, it's used there. Let's talk about man, his curse. It's also the same word translated to toil or pains when it talks about women giving childbirth in Eve's curse. And it's also the word used in Proverbs 10:22. And let me explain how that works. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. That word sorrow is the same Hebrew word as toil used in Genesis. So no toil when the blessing of the Lord does it. We struggle a lot with, well, is prosperity God's will? Let's use a different word besides prosperity. Fruitfulness is the first word. Let's use the first word that he used. Now, this is Apostle Paul. But those who desire to be rich, who chase after riches, fall into temptation and a snare. Remember those thorns and thistles in the curse, the thorns and thistles? For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith and greediness, and have pierced themselves through with many, what does that say? Sorrows. The blessing of the Lord makes rich, has no sorrow with it. You chasing it yourself gives you sorrows. It takes a lot of work to amass wealth for whatever your purpose is. So either you're going to do it or the blessing's going to do it. The blessing has to be the one to do it. So what is the invitation to rest? What is the anointing of rest? It's the anointing Jesus walked in. And when God put this on me and anointed me with this, he made me responsible for sharing it with many people who will listen. Guess what he did? Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. In the full passage, it talks about take my yoke upon you. This is not an abandonment of work. You're going to work more than you ever have in this system. But he's saying it's supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be light. And that's weird. How can we have maximum productivity, but somehow it gets easier? How does that work? Jesus said it's possible. If you take off your burden and put mine on, it's possible to do this. Because Jesus created with the words of his mouth. There wasn't enough fish and loaves. He created with the words of his mouth. There was a sickness and disease, a demon run up on him, words of his mouth. Time to pay taxes, words of his mouth. Fig tree, words of his mouth. That's what he's trying to teach us how to do. Isaiah 55, my favorite passage in the Bible, which to me gives the full breakdown of what rest is that he was inviting us to. Because Isaiah 55 was written prophetically as the Messiah talking to us. And I'm just going to read it off to you pretty fast here. Everyone who thirsts, come to the waters. You who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without price. So he's telling you to come buy something, but you're not going to use money to do it. That's not good enough. Your efforts aren't going to be able to get you this. But you're still going to have to spend something to get it. Why do you spend money for what is not bread and your wages for what does not satisfy? So he's criticizing the toil system and saying, you're on this toil system, you're on this hamster wheel, and you're not getting anything to satisfy you. Your needs aren't met. You get a little bit more money, inflation goes up, and it's just like you're back where you started. Why are you wasting your time on this? Listen carefully to me and eat what is good, and let your soul delight itself in abundance. That's what it's going to cost you. You have to stop and listen. That's how you buy this. It's not with your money, it's not with your efforts. When I was in distress, debt, and discontentment, when the Lord began to talk to me, I had to get still and get in his word. My lunch breaks, I was in his word. Times that I could be spending and getting a second job to make sure we met our rent, my wife was like, nope, you'll kill yourself if you do that. You don't need that extra stress. And so I would just get in the word, and I would study and abide in that word and listen. And he would speak to me. The Spirit of God would speak to me. And he would tell me, sow a seed like this. Do this differently. But I never got a second job. I never worked more hours, and things began to change. He began to teach me how to use the words in my mouth. I was in sales, and so he would say, speak that account ends up being yours, okay? It would happen. I give the whole story in the book. There's a story about how I had a coworker who was a top salesman in the company, and Lord said, he gave me very specific words of what to say. And he said, I want you to speak out of your mouth, because I'm speaking it to you, that he is going to leave this company, even though he was making six figures. There's no reason, the best job. He was there before I got there, and his account's going to be turned over to you. And I spoke that. And immediately, but the doubt set in. I said, why would that happen? Why would he do that? And God immediately spoke and said, I would not have told you if I had not already done it. There were a lot of times over the course of that year where it looked like nothing was happening. But just about exactly 1 year later, to that month, my boss came in the office and said, yeah, man, this coworker is leaving. There was a company that was overseas opening an American office. They hired this guy's friend, and then he called him up and was like, hey, man, come over here. I need you to come help me set up this American office, the first American office over here. Happens to be in our area. And I didn't know that this man's wife was putting pressure on him. You need to make more money. So he was already, I never knew that. Never knew that. I didn't need to know it because God just told me what to speak. And when that happened, I called my wife and said, I said, if you ever doubted your husband could hear from God. And we were just in amazement at what God had done. I did not do it. I did not toil to do it. I got the top account in that company. Changed us overnight. We just had our sons. We needed more money. But God did it. I didn't do it. I could not have done that. That is how the blessing works. That is how rest works. For my thoughts, it's still Isaiah 55. My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor your ways my ways, says the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. We're getting back to the garden. God wanted to think his thoughts through Adam. He's trying to get us back there. He's saying the thoughts that you have are there's a big gap between how you think and I think. How you can do it and how I can do it. He said, as the rain comes down, the snow from heaven, and does not return, but waters the earth and brings forth a harvest, that's how my word goes out from my mouth. When I speak, this is God talking. When I speak, it happens. And Jesus is trying to teach us how to do the same thing. That's what he was teaching his disciples. Maximum productivity without toil. And what's the result? You shall go out with joy, be led out with peace. The mountains and the hills break forth in the singing before you. All the trees of the fields will clap their hands like an old-time cartoon. Instead of the thorn, going back to that curse, instead of the thorn, it's going to come up the cypress tree. Instead of the briar, comes up the myrtle tree. It's going to be to the Lord for a name, for an everlasting sign that should not be cut off. Because at the end of the day, all God cares about is his glory. He wants the glory. If we can do it, he's not interested. Again, it's treasonous to operate in toil. you have to get back to rest. That's what he made us to do. Mailing list, if you're interested.